Episode 9 of Arcane is one of the only episodes in the series to not start with a flashback of some kind. The only other exceptions have been Episode 4, which was the first episode after a time skip, and Episode 7, which had that quick music video that still kind of relates to Echo. And the reason for this is simple. One is that it is the final part of Act 3, and the end of Season 1. The time for getting to know these characters has come and gone. Now we want to see what they do and how they change. And pacing. Everything has started to ramp up since the end of the last episode. With the factory fight and Jinx kidnapping Caitlyn, a flashback would have killed this pacing. And finally, the child. At the end of the last episode, Jayce accidentally kills a child. And this is something this episode wants to emphasize here. The episode starting on his dead face, reminding us of what has happened and trying to emulate to us what Jayce is going through right at that moment. And I mentioned before, the first scene of an episode can be one of the most memorable ones. From this point on, whenever Jayce makes a decision or does an action, we will think back to this scene and be reminded of why he is doing what he is doing. The boy that was killed turns out to be the son of one of the Chem Barons, Rennie. At the beginning of this series, the characters and events of Piltover had almost nothing to do with the Undercity. But now, every move by one person has an effect on another. Jayce mourned over not knowing what to do with the boy or whose family he belongs to, and we get to see his family in the very next scene. And due to his actions, he turns the Chem Baron Rennie against Silco, and further adds fuel to Finn's fire. And I love how Arcane leaves nothing unused. The Chem Barons were introduced in this final arc, and their role seemingly confined to Silco, to show us the effect Piltover is having on the people of the Undercity, and showing how they are taking Silco's current rule. But here they have branched out past Silco. And in this scene, it's interesting how the focus goes from Silco to Finn, even though he's talking to Rennie, almost as if there is a deeper meaning behind his words. Silco knows Finn is there and watching, and knows Finn has issues with the way he runs things. It's pretty clear that these words are meant for Finn in this scene. And finally, Savika's lingering stare at Finn, whose expression says, "You know I'm right." All set up for later. Victor is holding his assistant's glasses here. Flashes of the nightmare coming back to him. He looks at the Hex Core and realizes that it is too dangerous. And like Heimendinger said, it should be destroyed. And I feel that the rumbling noises it makes here in this scene become almost like a silent back and forth between it and Victor. The core has become almost like a drug for Victor. Victor knows he still needs it, and that he can go back to the high he has been on and finding a way to cure himself. And this can be very much like any kind of addiction we may have, where we may want to stop but end up going back. But I feel what is more frightening is how it feels like the core is protecting itself, reacting to Victor's actions, and even displaying power over the changed parts of his body. Victor also seems to use a cane later in the episode, so it could either be the trauma on his body that's stopping him from using his leg like he did to run on the dock, or it could be the Hex Core itself removing that ability from him. This scene shows how everything is linked in Arcane, and how every action has consequences that affect others, and how the world outside our characters feels alive, reacting to the actions our characters are making. Mel's mother spoke with Jayce in the last episode in order to make him take action. She wants Piltover to go to war with the Undercity because if they do, they will make weapons, and she wants those weapons. I mentioned this in the last episode, but her part to play in all this could have just as easily been done by an existing character. But it's amazing how Arcane goes to the extra lengths to bring in these additional characters and then asks why. Why are they doing this? Why is she trying to convince Jayce to attack the Undercity? All at the same time giving these characters links to existing characters to really make them feel a part of this world, that there are other things in this world moving all at the same time as independently from what our characters are doing. Victor is back in the place that is important to him, the place where Heimendinger found him and his life changed. We saw him in this place in a previous episode when he was struggling with his own mortality. And now he is back here again, mourning over his assistant and spreading her ashes. And I love how this is the place where things turn around for Victor again. He is about to end his own life, but Jayce saves him, returning the favour that of when Victor saved him from killing himself. But it's more than this. It was an act of friendship that changed Jayce, and in turn allowed them both to change their lives. It was an act of friendship that was Heimerdinger taking on Victor as his assistant. Victor has been alone these last few episodes, as has Jayce in a way, and I think the act of him turning up in this place is meant to change this. The timing of the appearance would also make you know that this means something, along with the roles being reversed from years ago. To Victor, this would be like a sign that things will get better, and that, like with Jayce, the two need to trust each other once again, and remind themselves of why they started it all to begin with. Sevika, Finn and Rennie come in, and Sevika pulls out the chair and pats it down for Finn, a clear show that power has changed. Silco doesn't know whose side Sevika is on, and knowing these could be his last words, he speaks of loyalty, something which resonates with Sevika, having saved her when she sacrificed her arm to protect him. Silco went that extra length to go and make sure she had a functioning arm that can work, that can let her live, and not just only do her job, but live her life. But I think the real reason he speaks of loyalty is Vander, who was brought up in the conversation. Silco was loyal to Vander, and Vander betrayed him. And I love how shocked he looks after Sevika swings, clearly not knowing whether he was going to live or die. And Finn drops to the ground. The lighter that seems to symbolise him, a new flame being brought in, is dropped to the ground, showing that this is his end. And something I missed on my first viewing was the letter from Jayce asking for a meeting here. I mentioned this in the very first video I did on Arcane, that I found it a little far-fetched that neither of them have any guards in this scene. But now that I think deeper on this, I don't think it was too far-fetched. Jayce has been through a lot and desperately wants to correct things. He went to this meeting and probably stated so in the letter that he would be weaponless and alone. I think he was willing to die here if it came down to it, but also knew that trust is important. He and Victor lost that trust in one another and started to drift apart because of it. So knowing this, Jayce is now extending that trust to Silco. And by trust here, I don't mean trust as in like a friendship kind of trust, but a trust in that both of them can get along and make something work out. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Silco has Sevika and some of his men hiding somewhere close by, just in case, but considering Jayce would have wanted to deal, it's not unreasonable to assume that he would play nice until he noticed something was up. We've experienced what the Undercity is like when enforcers are breathing down their necks, and how the Chem Barons are seeing this. This deal is perhaps just as important to Silco as it is for Jayce. We can also see that the area is open and clear as well, which would have allowed his men to search in case enforcers were hiding somewhere. And I love this shot here of the two, both standing by a rising sun, one with their back to the screen and one with their front to the screen. Jayce is willing to give Silco everything he wants, as long as he stops Shimmer production, hands back the gemstone, and gives him Jinx. And you can see that Silco keeps his composure just until Jayce moves past him, the final shot one of his back showing how dejected he is feeling. He's been given everything he's ever wanted, but he is definitely not feeling excited about it. And leading on to the next scene, we can see the same writing trick used here that they did in episode 4. We're reminded of Jinx, which also reminds us of what she did at the end of the last episode. This would have been a good time to switch scenes to her, but instead we get Echo, who fought Jinx last, starting to give us little bits of information to build up her eventual return. Is Jinx the same as the one we knew? How has she changed? At the end of the last episode, Singe warned us that she wouldn't be the same person, and we don't know what she's like now. And Arcane dangles these questions in front of us, knowing that we want the answers, and purposefully doesn't give them to us straight, instead just giving us hints as the episode goes on, to build up that anticipation of ours. In this scene, Echo tells Heimerdinger that it's not enough to give the people what they need to survive. You need to give them what they need to live. And I believe this statement parallels Jinx's position. Silco has given her what she needs to survive, but not necessarily what she needs to live. Vi is what Jinx needs to live. Her person and her family. Silco may be the father figure to her now, but he can't replace Vi. And in this scene, Silco talks to Vander. And I think just how Jayce and Victor were able to repair their friendship and understand one another again, in this moment Silco is able to understand Vander better. Silco has been presented with his vision, but he is questioning what he wants, and this shocks him, because once upon a time, he could never see anything as being more important. Once upon a time, he was literally filled with anger and hatred at Vander, unable to understand why Vander tried to kill him that day. But now, Silco understands. For all Silco hated Vander, he has effectively become Vander now. And the way he talks to him in the scene is like that of a brother, much like the scene with Jayce and Victor from earlier, and he even shares a drink with him. And I think if Vander, Clagger and Milo were alive now, Vander and Silco would probably see eye to eye. And finally we see Jinx overhearing the conversation, and much like in Act 1 of Arcane, what Jinx overhears is not what is actually meant. Again, it's like the beginning of a tragedy in motion. From all the way from the mistake that started the inciting incident to now in this final episode. Vi's rematch with Sevika appears to be far more emotional this time, for a number of reasons. One is that Sevika almost killed her the last time they fought. Vi is likely not only fighting Sevika, but also the memories of being stabbed by her. But mostly it is how she is alone. The council were unable to help her, and even Jayce left her after the battle in the factory. Vi could have gone to the Firelights for help, but this has never been her way. She has always been one to rush in there and turn to violence first. She tried, this attack being her last hope to defeat Silco, avenge her family, and get back her sister. And Arcane really shows this in these scenes. And before we get to the final scene, I wanted to point out in this one that Jayce calls Victor a Zornite. In this scene, you can tell that Jayce's heart feels clear. He's no longer trying to become someone that he is not, and even calls Victor his partner and a Zornite, already accepting in his head that the nation of Zaun is a thing, and perhaps always has been. And finally, we get to the tea party.
Really thought I buried this place. But I should have known better. Nothing ever stays dead.
Jinx is talking about her negative thoughts and fears. She's tried to bury it and move away from it, but it keeps coming back to haunt her. And so she is back at the factory, where it all started, where Jinx was born, as a final way of deciding who she should be. I think firstly we see just how much the change has affected Jinx. She doesn't appear to be shimmered up, but she seems to have all the heightened abilities that come with it, shown by not only her being able to capture Caitlyn and Vi and Silco, but also how she flicks the lighter across the table, lighting all the candles. And across the table is everyone that has meant something to Jinx, including the dolls she made of Milo and Clagger. Even the bunny representing Vi is there, and Vander's gauntlet and pipe. Most importantly is the positioning of Vi and Silco, both at different ends of the table to represent the two different families Jinx has and the different sides they are on. Jinx feels like she has lost even Silco now, that everyone has betrayed her, but out of everyone, Vi is still her sister and someone she loves, despite being betrayed, and that is why she is the only one who is not gagged. At this moment, Jinx wants to hear what she has to say. She asked if they are sisters, which is a strain of compulsive thoughts brought about by her seeing Vi with Caitlyn when she was under stress. She feels that she will be replaced with Caitlyn. And now that she's overheard Silco and doesn't trust him anymore, she has brought him as an offering to Vi. And you can see in this scene how she is standing next to Vi, clearly on one side of the table. She wants Vi to pick her. And in this part, she brings out the tray, making us think that Caitlyn's head is on there. I feel that this is kind of like a threat. Jinx doesn't outright say it, but she wants Caitlyn gone, and there is no compromise in that. But rather than just saying that, she makes Vi believe that if Caitlyn is around, her safety will be in danger. And I should also point out here that we're not exactly sure what effect the shimmer has had on Jinx, but I feel that as well as making her ability stronger, it has also made her mental illnesses stronger as well. The first thing Jinx did after she was healed was kidnap Caitlyn. But she also appears to be more on edge, actually reacting to these issues now, like shooting Milo's doll as opposed to just shouting back at the voices. And just a small note here, but in this time she has also fixed the damage to Jayce's gauntlets, using both of them to bring in the cupcake. A nice little taunt here is Vi would often call Caitlyn Cupcake, and where she made us think that Caitlyn's head was inside this tray, It was actually a cupcake.
You gonna help me out, Cupcake?
It could go away. Please.
When Jinx gives Vi the choice to get rid of Caitlyn, her voice changes. She was Jinx before, exuding the confidence and snarky tone, but here I feel she is more towards Powder. Her voice more nervous, afraid of being abandoned, and knowing that Vi may choose not to shoot Caitlyn and effectively abandon her again. This is a trauma to Jinx, and she is terrified of that. And now when Silco tells her that he would give up everything for her, it puts her into disarray. These are the words she's always wanted to hear. Silco is willing to do what Vi is not. And I think Jinx believes him here. The problem is that deep down she really wanted to hear this from Vi and not from Silco. And when Caitlyn attempts to shoot Jinx, Jinx could have killed her. In fact, Jinx had ample chance to kill Caitlyn, but she knows that if she did, Vi would hate her for it, and she would lose Vi. And I believe that she wants Vi to choose her over Caitlyn. Else Jinx could have killed Caitlyn in her house and made it look like an accident. But when Vi tells Jinx to picture everyone here, they don't appear as welcoming guests in her mind, but as monsters. Vi doesn't realize that these are the demons that haunt her. These are the people she has killed. They are negative experiences to Jinx, and this has sent her into a full-blown panic. And as Silco tries to shoot Vi, the one he believes causing Jinx this pain, Jinx acts. On my first watch, I thought this was a response to Silco's actions here, and that still might be true to an extent, but it actually looks like she was shooting all around the room, kind of like she did on the airship in episode 4. I think she was trying to shoot the monsters away, unaware or perhaps only slightly aware of what was actually happening around her. And something else that could point towards her actions being from Silco aiming at Vi is what Vi used to do when they were kids. She used to get carried away and scare Powder sometimes, and then would scare the monsters away, telling Powder that no monster's going to get you while I'm here. This could have been something that Powder was subconsciously thinking about whilst the monsters were attacking her. And so when Silco pointed the gun at Vi, at least some part of her knew that Vi couldn't go away because then the monsters might get her. And in Silco's final moments, he affirms that Jinx is perfect just the way she is, validating her. In his last moments, he wanted to make sure that Jinx was okay, not wanting her to carry the guilt of this act. And so Jinx sits in her chair. Jinx knows that Powder is dead. She has changed and doesn't want to go back to the way she was before. But Vi is trying to make her do this. She wants Powder back and not Jinx. And Jinx knows this. But Vi is her sister, her person. And as humans, I believe that, especially in Jinx's case, we would do everything we could to hang on to that person. But Jinx has decided she is beyond saving now. She is everything people have been saying about her. And she is no longer Powder and no longer able to become Powder or even attempt to. And now that Silco can't do it himself, Jinx is going to make everyone pay. Episode 9 has a real theme of family. Rennie's child was killed. Victor grieves over Skye, his assistant. Mel rejects her family, taking off her ring in the council chamber and tarnishing her painting. Victor and Jayce make up. Silco understands Vander, and pretty much everything in the final scene of this episode. And surprisingly, I think this theme is really highlighted with Mel. We can see that before she was trying to put Piltover on the map. And I think what we can really determine from this is that she was clinging on to her family. That she wanted to be accepted by her family. At least a part of her does. And so she still clings to it. And this is much like how Powder still clings to Vi. And at the end of the episode, like how Jinx finally stops clinging to Vi, Mel also stops clinging to her family. This episode really emphasizes the bonds of family and how those bonds define our characters and actions and affect them. Even right from the very first scene of episode 1, Vander chooses to become Vi and Powder's new family, his family changing him and his priorities as a person. It's been the driving force for Jinx along with what's been affecting her all this time. And even Silco has slowly changed because of it. We've seen the good and the bad of what it has to offer. But most importantly, this episode has displayed the power it has over our characters very clearly. One of the things I think that stands out the most in Arcane is its characters. When it comes to writing magic in stories, I believe that weaknesses and limitations that are put on the magic are often more interesting than the magic itself. Look at Superman as an example. If you ask someone to tell you one thing about Superman, you can all but guarantee that they're going to tell you that his weakness is kryptonite over something like, oh, he can shoot lasers from his eyes or fly or something like that. And I believe this concept translates over to characters as well. Jinx is the prime example of this. She's a badass, battle-hardened, and also a genius inventor, but it's not these aspects of her that make her character interesting. It is the voices she hears, the abandonment issues, the jealousy she feels when she sees Vi and Caitlyn together. Same thing with Silco. If he were unchanging in his vision in making the nation of Zaun, he would not be as interesting, but it's his love for Jinx and the struggle within him that makes him more interesting as a character. And if you look over the characters of Arcane, you can see these aspects in all of them. Even the very minor characters like Huck, who in all timelines, I should not remember, but the fact that he helped Caitlyn and then sells her out because of his addiction shows me a real and interesting struggle in a person. And this attention to detail is shown all throughout the series, from the micro expressions on characters' faces, to the drawings on Silco's ashtray, to the little bits of dialogue that are meant to fill in any potential plot holes. You can tell that this story was lovingly created, with every character being treated with the respect they deserve. And I guess, finally, Jinx. If I had to pick someone to be the main character of this series, it would be her. In a way, this whole season has been about her transformation from Powder to Jinx. She was the one who created the inciting incident in episode 1, starting everything off. She has been the motive for so many characters, and she has been the one who ends it in Arcane's final scene. And that's why this final scene is not a fight in the traditional sense, but a battle for what will become of her character. For the writers, I can only imagine how monumentous of a task this would have been. How dangerous it could have been if we as the viewers didn't accept some of the things happening to her, some of the things she suffered from, or some of the actions because of it. But the writers aced it. And who knows, maybe one of these days, school teaches about Arcane rather than Shakespeare. And now, the character map for one last time. As this is the final episode of Arcane, I thought it only fitting that we start from the character map from episode 1. I'm not going to go through all the details like I did before, but just to kind of show the changes as we go. And you can see from the character map in episode 1, the scope was very limited. The characters introduced very limited, with just 2 of the characters being from Piltover, most of which being from the Undercity. And if we look at episode 2, the character map has expanded significantly, with Jayce and many of the characters from Piltover being introduced in this episode, as well as more links between Piltover and the Undercity being created, but there's still being this divider between them, this divider between Piltover and the Undercity. And episode 3 showed a lot of changes, a lot of death of characters, and a lot of links being created. Arcane's a little unique in the way that episode 1, 2, and 3 is kind of like its own story. It is the prologue for the main series, in a way. And that's why for episode 4, I started off small again, showing just the characters introduced in that episode, showing that most of the episode here is revolving around Jayce and Jinx, Piltover and the Undercity. And as we go to episode 5, we can see more and more links being brought back in, more characters being introduced and created. But at the same time, there's still being a kind of separation between top and bottom, between Piltover and the Undercity, where only a few characters from the Undercity are linking into Piltover. The story is developing, we can definitely tell that by the number of links that have been created. But the actions of these characters are being localized to Piltover and to the Undercity, with only a few outliers there. And then for episode 6, you can see how more of the outer characters like Victor are being introduced and given detail on and becoming more rounded in the story as a whole. Also with our main characters having depth added to them and being given more links all around. And I feel here from episode 7 is where things start to leap out almost. We get a few more links between Caitlyn and Echo here. We get some more minor links from Piltover to Zaun, with some more minor character introductions being created as well. And I think this is the episode where we really start to see how actions of one really start to affect others, where now there looks like there is no separation between Piltover and the Undercity, where there are links going from characters from one to the other all over, where even characters on the outer sides, like the Ken Barons and Mel, are becoming a little more well-rounded out and a little more fleshed out in the story. And finally, episode 9. We can definitely see here that there is almost no discernible difference between Piltover and the Undercity here. Actions are affecting everyone, like Jayce's actions to raid the factory. The character maps at this point have almost been like the war being waged between Piltover and the Undercity, where at first they are separated, only minor instances and occurrences happening, but now it's almost like a full-fledged war happening to them, where actions and relations between these characters are growing and changing all over the place. And you can see on this character map just which characters have had the most effect on the story as a whole. Jayce with all of his links here, Jinx with all of her links, Vi with all of her links, and Silco with all of his links. These four have been definitely the key main characters in this series. And with slightly less main characters, we have characters like Caitlyn, who have a lot of links to her. And as I've mentioned throughout this entire series, I think this graph really just shows you how Arcane does not let any character go unused. There are almost no characters on this map that are by themselves, almost no characters that just have a single link to their name. Every character in this story has had multiple purposes, has had multiple reasons for being there, has had their stories and backstories and personalities fleshed out. I hope everyone has enjoyed the analysis of episode 9, the finale of Arcane. I love this show so much, and I really cannot wait for season 2. Well, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can be aware of whatever I might tackle next, or stay up to date on the book I'm currently writing, of the first chapter of which you can see in the link below. Well, again, thank you very much for watching. This has been That's Effin' Rich, and I'll see you on the next one.